Ready Player One.
Dave's
Pop culture
Podcast.
Did you put pizza all over this house? You make me so angry, or you're fired.
Good one, Patrick.
Welcome to Dave's Pop Culture Podcast YouTube edition. Today we're starting a new series where the three of us get together and talk all things Batman. This originally started out as a segment of my podcast finale, but we got such great feedback, we're bringing it over to YouTube. So sit back, throw on your DC shirt, and enjoy episode 1 of Bat Chat.
How's it going, everybody?
What's up, Ed?
Not a whole lot. Just been
How you
to
doing,
talk
man?
to some two cool dudes. I'm doing great.
Two cool dudes. Wait, you mean we got somebody else with us?
Oh, dude. You didn't see him? Is he hiding in the shadows?
Well, maybe it's because he's so far away. Let's also bring out the only other person who can pull off that turtleneck and leather jacket. What's up, Neil?
How you doing, Dave? Hi, Ed.
How's it going, Neil?
Looking forward to it.
What we're going to do is I'm just going to throw out some topics, and we're just going to go around and talk about all things that we love, all things we dislike, hopefully not too much dislike. Let's kickstart this thing with what I love about Batman the most. I want to just talk about Batman villains. But I'll kickstart it and say, for me, I'm a Scarecrow guy. And so, Ed, tell me, bro, how do you feel about Scarecrow?
Scarecrow is one of those villains that if he had to be an actual horror movie by itself, I feel like he would fill that role pretty well. It would blend pretty well with sci-fi, so I think it suits you really well that you like him as much as you do. He's probably one of my top 10 for sure. I dig how he's always portrayed a little different in almost every medium. Sometimes he's a little bit more cartoony. Sometimes he's incredibly grim. And, I think almost every single portrayal by him has been spot on. But I think he's a pretty dope villain all in all.
I think that my favorite rendition of Scarecrow for me was in the Arkham Asylum computer game. It was absolutely brilliant in that. Again, I agree with Ed. I like the way he's portrayed in all the different mediums. He's great, great in the cartoon, proper sort of horror villain in the Arkham Asylum games. The only one I didn't really like so much was Cillian Murphy in the Batman films. It kind of just threw me a bit with it being the way they tried to make everything so realistic. So just Cillian Murphy in a mask, and it wasn't even I was hoping it'd be a little bit more on the sort of paranormal.
Yeah, and that's the thing about those movies, too, is that trilogy tries to be as realistic and believable as possible, which I think is why most people prefer that trilogy over anything else, is it's a stretch from the comic book. And I'm with you. I am biased because I absolutely love the Scarecrow, so getting to have kind of the first live-action Scarecrow, at least for a movie, was enough. And Cillian Murphy is a fantastic actor, from 28 Days Later and Red Eye. But the route they went with it, they did what they had to do to make it a solid film. And so though it's not my favorite portrayal, I still dig it. And for me, I know we talk about the different renditions. Give me Scarecrow. I want the classic. I want the, that kind of burlap sack cloth look over his face. And then that he's got to have the hat on. I want the pitchfork. I kind of like Ed said, I want that horror, that nightmarish and evil look. And so for me, it definitely dives into the animated versions of Scarecrow, because you can do anything with that. But even just anything from the early 90s to mid 90s, and I'll even take a stretch of the 2004 The Batman cartoon, and the different voice actors are spot on. But guys, I traditionally don't like the version that you're talking about, Neil, for the video games. I didn't play the games, so that might be part of it, but it definitely changed. He had syringes and he had the gas mask and all that. Is that the right one I'm thinking of? Okay. Definitely cool. Still my guy for Scarecrow, but I just like that more classic, put him on the pitchfork thing look.
Speaking of video games, I know pretty well Injustice 2, Dave. We talked about it multiple times. I don't know. Neil, have you ever played Injustice 2 or at least watched videos of the portrayal of Scarecrow?
I've seen a little bit of the story mode, but I am so bad at fighting games. I've always stuck. I always
I understand.
Steer clear of them because there's a very good story to them. I know that.
Absolutely. I would say that if you started playing any of the Mortal Kombat games, WB and them, they merged together. And I guess Netherworld or NetherRealm, that company, they started making a lot of these Injustice games. one of the great things they did about Scarecrow is they found an awesome voice actor. They actually got Robert Englund, the guy who played Freddy, to do Scarecrow's voice. So cool little tidbit right there.
Well, and it completely makes sense because the thing that Scarecrow does is, with the fear toxin, he induces nightmares. So you have Robert Englund, the guy that is your nightmare. It perfectly goes hand in hand. And what's really cool is Robert Englund also voiced the Riddler in the 2004 The Batman. So yeah, man. And, even just going back to the 60s and whatnot of some of those comic books when, the evolution of the Scarecrow character, when he started out, there wasn't a lot of detail. It was very kind of plain, and just seeing how much that character has changed and what they do with the cartoons, man. So obviously the horror aspect has a lot to do with why I like Scarecrow. Like you mentioned, Ed, earlier, I love the psychological aspect of things too. And so the voice direction, the animation, the creativity with the character, and maybe the deep down fear that I just want to give people nightmares. But Ed, I'm going to throw it your way, man. Let's talk about a Batman villain of your choice.
I mean, I'm actually wearing the shirt of my favorite villain right now. It's got Mr. Freeze on it. It says, revenge is a dish best served cold. I've actually got quite a few comments on it, just like random people in the grocery stores.
So a few things on that, Ed. You said people come up to you and compliment your shirt. You said even in the supermarket. So how many old ladies do come up to you and talk about your Mr. Freeze shirt? Actually
been 2. Just random. They're like, hey, cool shirt. I know that guy. I don't know if you actually do or not. All right. Awesome.
Yeah, you're not like me where someone comes up to you and says, oh, I like your shirt. Really? Who is this? Who's this character right now? What's their middle name?
Put them on the spot. I love this character just because, similar to Scarecrow, even if he had his own standalone movie, which he does, but even if he wasn't Batman related, he would be just like a dope villain. I love his voice actor. Michael Ansara, I believe he passed away, so he wasn't able to, continue the voice as multiple renditions came out. But, despite that, I feel like almost every single portrayal of him has been pretty cool, except for, the obvious one. And that was definitely a pun. And that's kind of why I said that. Except for Schwarzenegger. I do like Schwarzenegger, though. I think he's a great actor as a, what's the best term to explain it? He's kind of a novelty, if you go back to the 90s and you just look at certain actors that have the dude just jumped into so many different roles. It's hard not to at least mention him as far as the 90s. Is he an amazing actor? I don't think that anyone's saying that, but the fact that the dude's accomplished a lot, it's kind of crazy. So short of the Batman and Robin, Mr. Freeze, I think just about every rendition I've seen him in, I've loved him. I liked him. He had a standalone episode in Batman Beyond, which I've got a fondness for. And it was like a 1 or 2 episode series. And it was very touching. It brought back a lot of memories, and it ended kind of on a sad note, but it was also kind of badass at the same time. It's almost like a redemption story. And I love that his character went full circle, even though it went all the way to the future. So
he's one of those kind of sort of sub-character villains that they sort of bring back on a regular basis because everybody knows him. There was a standalone animated film. Was it Sub-Zero?
Sub-Zero.
I think that, yeah, which really went back into his story arc and how everything played out. Watched that several times, and it's one of my favorite Batman animated films.
So much of Mr. Freeze's character was developed, or should I say recreated, in the animated series in the 90s when Paul Dini kind of wrote that story of Heart of Ice, and you got a lot of that Victor Freeze and his wife Nora backstory. It was Ed and I have watched it many times, and it was going to eventually be an episode, and who knows what happens in the future, but it's so emotional. Like, there's so much heart to Mr. Freeze, which is why he was number 4 in my top 5, is because I love villains with heart. Because I believe that they say money's the root of all evil, but I believe love is. Spell it backwards, I'll show you. But so many just elements come from somebody who's driven by passion, regardless of if it's for a positive or negative thing. And seeing his motive, like, he's a good dude who was just done wrong. That's how some of your best villains start out. They were your ex-employer. They were someone who, got their whole family. I mean, looking at you, Neil, wearing a Punisher beanie right now. That guy just being the vigilante that he is. I mean, it's Batman chat, but I'll dip Marvel. I'll put the tip in a little bit. I'll just let you know, man. Someone kills your whole family, ruins it, takes everything away from you. You just come back with a vengeance. Like Ed said, revenge is a dish best served cold.
Also, it just goes to show that one bad day can can really affect you.
That's it, bro. It's kind of like Michael Douglas falling down. But to tear off of that, question I have for you, man, is. You like Mr. Freeze. You're okay with Arnold, Mr. Freeze, but a lot of it is taken away. I'm wondering if it's more so because of how complex and compiled that movie tried to be. Had it just been a Batman and Arnold Freeze movie, what do you think?
I think it was naturally flawed just because Arnold's kind of a weird portrayal to begin with. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think he was the right actor. I like Arnold just because I like Arnold for lots of reasons, but I don't think he was the best choice for that. I don't know
too Arnold for Mr. Freeze? Like, was he just not serious enough?
Yeah. I mean, when you typically see Mr. Freeze, he's kind of like an older scientist looking type character. And he just didn't really fit that bill to me, like right off. I felt like, oh, Arnold's popular. Let's put him in this movie. People are going to love it, And instead of choosing the right actor, and I never really put that much thought into who would be the best actor, just because I love the animated films so much more and the animated portrayal so much more. But that movie, and I guess I'll tie in what I could best describe as just overdoing it. I'll throw in a little bit of Marvel. Spider-Man 3 had a very similar issue where with Venom, it's like one of my favorite characters. They put in like Topher Grace, and it was just not the right portrayal. Like they said, oh, well, Topher Grace is a little popular. Let's just put this actor in there. We think he can do it. But everyone sees him as that 70s show. He's just Foreman. It's just like, I could not imagine Eddie Brock as Venom because he's just not very intimidating. And I felt like he was more of like kind of like a bully jock character. Instead, he was almost like a pushover, like little bitch. And then he just turned into an angry little bitch. And I'm just like, this is bad. And that kind of ruined it. And they just had too many things going on in that movie. And I think Batman and Robin kind of just had that same feel. And, I think if they could do it all over again, I think they would make some better choices, So, I mean, sometimes he even kind of did some morally positive things. I remember one time he sacrificed himself, like specifically in, I guess spoiler, but in Batman Beyond, he actually sacrificed himself to not kill Batman. Like Batman, it was a falling building, and he's just like, I'm good, man. Just get out of here. And he just like held up the building as long as he could with his ice powers or whatever. So
I remember watching that with you too. That took me by surprise.
Yeah, and I think it was just time that he just went away. He wanted to be with Nora, and I thought that was very complex for a villain to do.
But then that goes back to what Dave was saying about he's one of the few villains that's got heart. He's not a straight out villain. I mean, his motives are very different to a lot of the other villains. So he will clash with them because obviously their motives are power, money, revenge.
So with all that all being said, who's your favorite villain, Neil?
We could sit here and I could throw out some of the old classics, but my favorite Batman villain ever since he's been around is one of the newer, reasonably new characters. It's Killer Croc. Oh. My favorite comic is Hush, and he's a main player in Hush. Again, I think he was he in the 80s? He came in, and I love Crocs. Who doesn't love buff dudes? Combine the two, you've got yourself Killer Crocs.
Let the record show Neil loves buff dudes. Moving on. No, Killer Croc's a cool character, man, and I'll tie in the video game too, and I'll throw it back to you again. But there's again, I don't know. I know DC is potentially more dark than Marvel, but just the three that we've mentioned so far, such a cool horror aspect. I mean, this guy is a killer crocodile. I mean, he's going to shred you apart and eat you alive. And yeah, he's menacing and he's large. And
well, it's the one thing that's disappointed me about sort of the late versions of him, because he's supposed to be huge, you know, sort of 7, 8, 9 foot tall. And I mean, in the computer games, he's well over 10, 12 feet tall. Obviously in the Suicide Squad, just a regular sized dude, basically. I mean, again, that's possibly the worst depiction of him I've ever seen. But again, that's for a film that's all about sort of the paranormal and sort of these. They tried to get all the characters kind of how they were in the comics, so they've actually got powers and things. Yet just make Killer Croc an average-sized guy with a few scales. They had a perfect opportunity to do I mean, maybe they were trying to avoid doing the whole Hulk thing, but to be honest, how that film turned out, they probably should have risked it, to be honest. But I absolutely love Killer Croc. He's just everything I want in a villain.
I think that's pretty cool, man. I think I agree with you on the Suicide Squad bit, but I think probably the reason why they did that is because maybe they didn't want to really explore his backstory anymore. And to be honest, I don't know that much more. I'm assuming he has much more complexity than what they showed in Suicide Squad. And they probably would have made like a full-blown CG character. I think the same reason why they did Killer Croc the way they did in Suicide Squad is the same reason why they did Bane the way they did in Dark Knight Rises. It's like this guy was a giant luchador who was like all hopped up on, I think they called it Venom. And dude, they never showed that. They just made Bane like this badass, like, I mean, I guess he had some wrestle moves or whatever. He was almost like a WWE character. I wouldn't call him like an actual luchador. I don't know. I mean, and we can debate all day why they didn't do it. Maybe it was a big CGI thing and they had already doing so much, and to make a full blown character, kind of like, I mean, you can name on your hand how many good versions of CGI villains there are. Like, I guess Thanos, I mean, he really was huge and they did do him right, but the budget on his character was so massive that I guess they had to do it the way they did.
But just to go back to what you said, are you saying Steppenwolf was not a good CGI ad?
Oh my God. That Steppenwolf, he ruined that. And because I also disliked Ares in Wonder Woman. I don't know what it was with some of the DC movies where they're like, hey, let's just like throw this character in with almost no plot, or just like, they should have went into better like backstory with villains. And I think that's where Batman as a comic, Batman as an animated TV show, I think they really hit the point where they're like, we're going to actually give you a backstory and we're going to make you care about these characters before we just throw them in as this like big bad and then just something for the heroes to kill. And that's what makes Batman's universe so unique. With Killer Croc, they just probably didn't see him as important as maybe Enchantress, you know what I mean? Which she was like the real villain of it all. But I hear you, man. He probably didn't get as much credit. And I'll give him more credit because I only ever seen him as like a really subpar, like just kind of side villain. I've never really seen him do anything major. And it's probably because I haven't really read the comics with him in it. And so, you know.
Yeah, I just want to interject. Do you guys like my Suicide Squad hat that that you guys are knocking on right here?
Oh, it's
yeah, look at Suicide Squad, baby. Look at that. Yeah, it looks good. But man, Ed, you know, when we talk about Killer Croc, you know, what comes to my mind is that cut scene in Injustice 2, man. In between levels, when he just busts out of the water, he picks you up and smashes you against the walls and just chunks you through. That's the Killer Croc that I want to talk about, man. That's the Killer Croc that Neil is in love with, man. They need to do something.
Also, with the way you're talking about the computer games, his first appearance in Arkham Asylum game, where he's under the water and you're jumping across basically the sort of broken bits in the sewer, and you don't see him, and then he just bursts up out of the water. It's pretty rare to be sort of scared by a Batman game, but it did have me on edge quite a lot playing that.
Question for you before we get into anything further. So when I looked at Killer Croc, I always kind of compared him to like the Marvel version of, you know, like who is it? Is it Lizard Man or is it the Lizard in Spider-Man? the doctor who has to like he loses his arm, so he injects himself with a serum to like I guess regrow it. He ends up turning himself into a lizard. I always kind of saw him as that type of character. Do you know if that was if the creation of Croc had anything to do with, because you know they're always like, Marvel and DC are always clashing and making characters are so similar to each other. Do you know if that had any kind of impact, because Lizard did come first in the 60s and Croc I think was in the 80s when he first came out? Is there any kind of correlation, or not sure? Or
I think that they were similar in a way that I think he'd always been, whether I was a doctor or not I don't know, but he grew up with scaly skin. And I think that he was teased and through his childhood because of his skin. As he grew up, I think he tried to develop, or somebody tried to develop a solution for him, which just made him bigger. It made his skin go tougher. And I think it got to a point where he just evolved. Then he obviously had some sort of mutation, which then just basically made him increasingly reptilian until he turned into Killer Croc.
That's actually pretty awesome backstory. I like that.
He joined a traveling circus where he got the nickname Killer Croc, and he was a traveling freak show. So he basically broke out of the circus and went on a rampage.
I'm sorry.
How it all started.
That movie.
Yeah, I'd much rather watch that than Suicide Squad, to be honest.
And that wraps up episode 1 of Bat Chat, where we discussed our favorite Batman villains. Who are your favorite villains? Let us know in the comments below, and some recommendations on what you would like us to do in future episodes. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you the next time on Dave's Culture Podcast.